We're continuing to work through the outcome management basics and down to collect data and track results. Most of these units have been very straightforward. This one, though, takes a little bit of a different turn. You can see that we're going to talk specifically about dynamic assessments, but I'm actually going to come back to that because, as you can imagine, we're talking about how to collect results, and then we're going to talk about how do we track those results. And if we look at the data model, we've been focused up here. We just did creating a performance period, and now we're going to apply results to a period that roll up to indicator assignments. So here are the instructions, relatively straightforward. So we have an H1. I haven't used this prompt before, so this is interesting. So I'm going to click here, and yeah, we can just drag and drop it. Let's say we want to put it over here for now. Anyway, it's just a reminder that we want to track results. So I'm going to say dismiss it. So we're looking at an indicator performance period record for H1. Ended up building an H1 because that's what they're tracking data on, so let's work with that. So we're going to a related record because indicator results are related. We're going to click New. We inherit the indicator performance period. The result value is 1.9. We're going to call it a final as opposed to an interim. Going to let the measurement date be June 28th. The description tells us this is an average weekly missed meals for all participants, reported in aggregate for all respondents. This number is a calculation across all of the assessments. There's no mention of this calculation details in the instructions, but we have the choice of being non-manual, automatically calculated. And there's a flow option we're going to see in just a second, but we're going to say fine. We're going to save this. And then we see this information that does show up, which is the version of the flow that calculated it, the flow name. We can do the calculation method. We've got a numerator and a denominator if in fact what we're doing was calculating percentages, or it depends on how we'd actually bring that together. The instructions mention that we could automatically calculate these indicator results with a flow. With the click of a button, you can generate results. So let's see what that's about. So this is an article as part of Outcome Management Setup that talks about using flow to calculate indicator results. And it says it's looking at goal assignments with a target completion date within the time period, and then it's going to calculate. So taking a look at the flows that are included in the trial, they have a calculate completion percentage for indicator results. And this is an indicator results flow. So it launches a screen flow when initiated by a user to calculate and create indicator results for a selected indicator performance period. Okay? So we could run this. Instead, what we're going to do is to open it. And what we see is this is the full flow here. So I'd encourage you to dive in and take a look at this as well. But what we're doing then is looking at how do we actually create indicator results. But scrolling back to the top, this business of assessments is intriguing. Because what they're doing is introducing dynamic assessments. It's a very different conversation. Before we leave the indicator result, though, I thought it was worth taking a quick look at the fields. So if we go out to edit the object, and we look at our relationships and fields, what it tells us is we've got a master detail, but we're really seeing all of those fields that we were just looking at. But notice that there is no connection here, no option to connect this back to a case. An indicator result sits out here, but there's no way to bring it back to the person who was involved. So the assessment actually doesn't even show up here. Looking at this outcome management data model, Notice that we don't have assessments anywhere else here. We have our indicator results. There's no mention of populating those, and no connection back to a case or a client contact, however you want to look at it. Let's take a look at assessments, because this is a very powerful piece of the model. And look at all assessments for the trial org. We're not seeing any assessments. So nothing comes with the trial org that I can see. But if we look at the object manager and go out and take a look at the fields that we have in the assessment, we do have this interesting polymorphic field, which allows us to do a response context. And from what I can tell, this is about pre-filling fields and questions on an assessment. But notice we have the care plan, we have program enrollment, and referral, plus a lot of other objects that I'm not familiar with, but I guess we'll all get familiar with them eventually. But it's worth noting that the assessment object does have a relationship back to the case and to a contact ID and to a parent assessment. So there's ways of creating nested assessments as well. Also found this Salesforce help document. Again, this is outcome management setup that talks about optional outcome management customizations. We can talk about this with the next unit. This one's relevant in terms of being able to look at timelines of indicator results. But I especially wanted to focus on this one, which is to configure a discovery framework. And this just scrolls right down to it. To set up discovery frameworks and assessments, we need to configure these permissions. And then what it says is to follow the dynamic assessments in the public sector solutions to turn it on. And this help article provides a detailed list for the setup of dynamic assessments with prerequisites and questions, creating an omni task, adding questions, and then it gets down to create an action plan template, and then we can create an action plan. We can look at taking action plans and action plan templates and pull them into published care plan templates, which we can use when we develop care plans for case management. There's also this note in Salesforce Help, and this is a Spring 24 release, that says we can connect case management care plans to outcome management. So we can indicate which care plan goals will drive outcomes. So in addition to adding assessments, we can also indicate which care plan goals drive outcomes. So plenty for us to learn. And going into OmniScript, was able to create an emergency shelter intake, just an example assessment template that we can build. So we do have access to this in the trial, and I look forward to a future playlist walking through how these things get built. And the next video is really the last step, building a junction object to connect impact strategies and outcomes. Lots to learn.